Hello and welcome. Today I'm adding mysterious stones from the Technos Arcade Collection 1 to my ever-growing list where I rank every Evercade game ever. Originally released in 1984, Mysterious Stones is a exploration treasure hunting game where you control Dr. John, who is quite obviously heavily inspired by a certain character played by Harrison Ford. Although apparently in earlier versions in Japan he was called Dr. Kick, which is appropriate because a lot of the game involves kicking stones, so he's clearly wearing some quite impressive steel toe cap boots, and perhaps even got told to kick rock a lot as a kid and took it a little bit too literally. Okay, that wasn't funny, but anyway, moving on. Yeah, it's a single screen adventure, well, single screen or flip screen adventure where you were exploring ancient tombs in a homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark, particularly the beginning of it, because the entire game plays out like the opening sequence of that movie. As I understand it, this is a lesser known arcade game. I'd certainly never heard of it, so safe to say there's no nostalgia here. I first heard of it and played it on the Evercade, and when I first played it I bounced off it pretty quickly. But it did come up in Katie's challenge on the Evercade Discord, and that's where I took the time to learn it, got some tips off of other people, and managed to fully master it. And ended up really enjoying the game. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty positive review, but let's go through the things and yeah, I'll tell you my thoughts. Starting with
the graphics.
It's an arcade game from 1984. Clearly it's not going to be all that graphically. Dr. John's is a fairly cute cartoony looking take on Indiana Jones. The colour palette is fairly bright and vibrant, but it successfully conveys the imagery of ancient tombs well. Everything's well represented, clear and readable, and generally has a certain type of appeal to it. So while I don't think anyone would regard it as a graphical masterpiece, it's solid and it more than does the job.
Sound and music.
I bet you can't guess where the music takes its cue from. Yep, it's got a very Indiana Jones style theme type sounds to it. Probably close enough to be lawsuit inducing, but I guess they got away with it as the game went under the radar, which is a good thing because it really suits the action here. The sound effects are very early arcade in their stylings, but they work perfectly. There's cues for all the right things, so really I've got absolutely no complaints sound wise. It's of its time, but it works very well.
Gameplay.
Now this is the hardest part to judge, because when I first played it I bounced off it hard. I just thought it was awkward and, well, basically a bit rubbish. The gameplay is top-down single screen stuff, or mostly single screen. The screens do scroll left to right, but it's made up of certain screens or maps, whatever you want to call it. You navigate Dr. John's up and down and left and right across the screen. You can shoot enemies with your gun, and you can kick rocks with your impressive steel toe cap boots, I guess. Shooting enemies effectively temporarily resets them, but it's not about killing the enemies, it's about finding treasures. To do that you kick the rocks, which basically look like eggs, and they'll roll back and forth. If you're in the way when they bounce back, you're going to get knocked flying, so you don't want to do that. The rocks will have treasures and things under them. Some rocks will flash red once they've been cracked. I suppose they're eggs then if they're cracked. But whatever. Yeah, some of them have treasures and bonus items in them. On each of the screens within the temple, you need to uncover a ghost, or I guess it's a ghost or a spirit, and then shoot it, which will allow you to exit that room. But there could be other things. Some which will be effectively death, which will follow you around and kill you. There's a staff which will mark up all the eggs or rocks with treasures in them, and so on and so forth. There's various things that will help you along the way. What threw me off on this game at first is, although it is played from a top-down view, the characters are all side-on effectively, and Dr. John's will shoot. Effectively, I think Dr. John's is made up of two 16 by 16 tiles, and the shooting gets the first tile, so if an enemy is on the lower tile you're not going to hit it, so you have to position it, and I found that a little bit awkward at first. And with kicking rocks and then rolling back and forth and knocking you flying, again I found it awkward, and just, yeah, there wasn't much to enjoy to me at first. I didn't take the time to learn it. On top of that, when you're navigating the inside of the temple, the route can be quite varied. When you clear a room, a number of exits will appear, and you have to find your way to the treasure room. Once in there, you have to select one of 3 treasures, and then get out, make it back to the plane where you flew in at the very beginning, and that's that initial run over. Then you go back to the museum and your treasure gets valued. There are effectively 3 runs, each with a different temple. Each time you get to pick one of 3 treasures, and when you have done 3 loops, or when you've done all 3 temples, you'll get an overall score. If you get the right treasures in the right order, you'll get a massive points bonus. You might be able to see my previous best score at the top there, which is pretty epic. I think that took me 3 loops to do, but I'm horribly out of practice at the game and I struggled to complete a loop this time around. But I'd say it's been a while because the routes through the temple can change. I won't say they change, but there's 3 entrances at the beginning, and depending on which entrance you take will affect the route you take to the treasure room. Some will be shorter than others. Not to mention you have a time limit, and rooms can have a time limit with them collapsing into lava if you're not quick enough, along with various other traps, because each screen or room of the temple is something of a puzzle in itself. So to really master the game, you're not just mastering the controls and the basic puzzles of it, you have to master the routes of each temple. And it's very much a game that rewards replaying and mastering.
Overall opinion.
Mysterious Stones is something of an unusual arcade game, and I can understand why it wasn't a success on its initial release, but I think it's absolutely one you should check out on the Evercade if you have the Technos Arcade Collection 1. Now sadly it is legacy, but it should be one you can still find for a reasonable price, at least for the moment. It's a game that may not be the easiest to get into and you might find yourself bouncing off it like I did, but I think it's genuinely worth putting the effort in, because during that week while it was on Katie's challenge I went from barely knowing how to play the game to saying I think I've successfully mastered it. I looped the game 3 times on 1 credit, although there's no way I could do it now, I'm out of practice. Now on the negative side of things, like I said, the controls aren't the easiest things to get used to, but they are learnable. And since I have mastered it and I've played it so extensively for a week and really got to know the game inside and out, I haven't felt much urge to go back to it. I think for all the little secrets and touches it does have, I think it lacks sort of long-term replayability. There comes a point where you've just done everything and seen everything it has to offer, but it'll take you a while, so give it a try if you haven't.
Ranking.
Placing it on my overall ranking list where I rank every Evercade game ever, I'm placing it above Cybattler but below Vimana, putting it at 105 out of 378 games that I've ranked so far. Anyway, I think that's everything for this video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.